So the overarching or the long-term goal that I had set up for myself this year was that I wanted to increase engagement in my classroom in order to support students with the bigger things, the bigger concepts, the overarching ideas for the year, because I really like to teach through novels, and a lot of the time novels have like really complicated themes or they have really complicated symbolism, and I really wanted to figure out a way to introduce that to the students without having to stand up and lecture, because I'll be completely honest, lecturing is not my strong suit. I cannot stand and talk for a long period of time. My words get jumbled, I get confused, I get lost, the students get bored, I get bored. So my goal for this year was to really figure out, how can I introduce them to these things? How can I get them pumped up and excited about the units that we're going to be discussing without standing there and lecturing them about the historical context or, about the author or things that they should know. So I tried to the best of my ability, come up with different experiences for my students. A lot of them I got from different teachers off of Instagram or through teacher blogs. Some of them I created on my own. But I think I did a really great job of it. I still have students talking to me about some of the experiences that I set up. For example, one that I took from another teacher that I had read online was in my sophomore honors class. We read Night by Elie Wiesel, and during chapter 2, when the characters are loaded onto a train car and kept in there overnight, I wanted my students to really understand that feeling of just how uncomfortable this is for these people. And so I sectioned off a part of my classroom, told them to grab all their bags, everything that they brought with them for the day, because it's as if they were carrying their luggage or in all of their belongings. And I told them to load up into the train, and we stood there and uncomfortably read chapter 2 out loud. And after we had an amazing discussion about this idea of people being uncomfortable and being forced to do these things, and just how awful they felt for the 20 minutes it took me to read the chapter, compared to the months that some of these people spent on trains, and they'll never forget that. I also set up different experiences for my students when it was time to read Lord of the Flies. I had them come into the room. There was instructions on the board that they had just crash landed on a deserted island. They were going to have to elect a leader. That leader was going to have to come up with priorities of shelter, food, fire, water, and they were going to have to work together to get off this island. And I sat there, I watched, I didn't say anything, I didn't give them any help, I didn't clue them in, and it was crazy to just see how quickly the whole classroom turned into chaos. And it was the chaos that I wanted, because the next day when we came back and I had them reflect on what happened, where did it go wrong? How did you guys end up with no shelter and no food and no fire? And when we got to talk about it, we really talked about how they lost their civility, and how being in a situation that was chaotic, where there was no clear leader as the teacher and no clear understanding of how to get things done, that they completely turned on each other as a classroom. And this is a class that I would consider a very united class. And so having that conversation and then telling them, okay, now we're going to read Lord of the Flies, and this is one of the things that we're going to talk about, is the loss of civilization and the descent into savagery. The whole book, they just had a better understanding of what that meant because they lived it. When we read Anthem, I worked really hard to teach them about collectivism, and it was a concept that they needed to understand, and they needed to get that it's a different kind of society, and it is like their dystopian books that they enjoy reading, but this is a very specific kind of dystopian. So I distributed a new class syllabus, and it was meant to be all collectivist ideals, where they didn't have names anymore. They were going to be called by their student numbers, where the class was going to receive one grade and they were all responsible for that grade. And it was interesting to see how different classes reacted to that. One class was immediately against it and immediately told me that it was wrong. Another class let me do it for the whole hour of that class. They were just very submissive, and you're the leader, you're the teacher, so I will do as you say, and if this is how we're doing it, this is how we're doing it. And again, the discussion that comes out of that is, well, why didn't you guys ask me, this is wrong, or why didn't you stand up for yourselves? And they talked about authority and how easy it is to just be a sheep and just follow what you know. And so that was a really interesting thing. And so that pumped me up, because at the start of every unit, I got them to understand one of the bigger ideas that I needed them to understand, which eventually helped them as they're reading the book, because now we're reading Anthem and they understand collectivism. I'm not having to explain it through a PowerPoint. I'm not having to pull up examples of it. They lived it. They understand what it is. When we talked about civility versus savagery in Lord of the Flies, they understand that feeling because they lived it. It was in our classroom. And same when we're reading Night and we're looking at the horribleness that comes out of World War II, they get a very small taste of that discomfort, but then they have something to kind of compare it to. They spent 20 minutes uncomfortable in an air-conditioned classroom while I read to them, but giving them the ability to imagine what it was like for other people in an even worse situation really changed the way that they viewed the book. And that was something that was not only amazing for them, because they're probably going to remember that, but it was also amazing for me as a teacher to get them experiencing the literature, because now they're excited. Now they want to read these books. Now they want to know more. They want to know what happens to Piggy. And they get upset when they learn what does. And that is really why I wanted to give them some type of engagement. I don't think I would do very well as the stand-in lecture kind of teacher, but I do really enjoy giving them those opportunities to experience these larger concepts or themes or ideas or whatever it is that I want them to know before we start something. I give them the opportunity to really live it and experience it for themselves. And I don't know, it's something that I think I will continue to improve and continue to work on for the rest of my career.